Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Dear listener, we're here very honored by the presence of Reverend Karen Herrick. She is currently the president of the Academy for Spiritual and Consciousness Studies, and you can go to their website at www.aspsi.org. And also, professionally, she has so many titles and so many expertise to offer to us because she has been sharing clinical expertise for 20 plus years in her private practice by lecturing throughout the United States on dysfunctional and addictive homes, dissociation, grief, and loss. Karen was ordained in New York City in the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in 1995. Her ministry is to be actively involved in spiritual psychology. Her PhD thesis was entitled Naming Spiritual Experiences, and believe it or not, her mentor was Dr. Raymond Moody Jr., which is a good friend of ours and a good friend at Kardec Radio. Thank you so much, Reverend Herrick, for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You know, the first question that comes to our mind, and how did you get your focus and interest in this line of work with dysfunctional families? I know it came from a personal experience, right?
Yes, it did. Well, my father was alcoholic, and my mother was just angry a lot. And so, having been raised in an alcoholic home, I married and divorced an alcoholic, and then I had 3 children. And I decided I had 3 girls, and if I was going to leave this marriage, I needed to have some education. So I went back to college and got an AA and then a BA, and then they told me, well, you can't eat on this BA, so you have to have a master's. So then I looked and decided to get a master's in social work at Rutgers University in New Jersey. That's where I was living, and that's where I do live. Anyway, at Rutgers they had an alcohol minor, and I thought, well, you know, my father drank and my husband drank, and you know, I think I'll just take that alcohol minor. And the first semester, I don't know how the teacher put up with me because, you know, when somebody's talking to you about something you lived and only they're explaining it like in an educational facility, it's like, what? Oh, my God, I lived that. Oh, could you repeat that? I didn't quite get it, you know. So then I decided I wanted to help other people learn about the disease concept of alcoholism, and about the children in the family, and about how we don't learn how to parent because there's such dysfunction. And so what I did after I got my MSW finally, and then I got a certification in alcohol, and became an alcohol and counselor with my MSW, with my social work degree. I put a course in at Brookdale College and taught that for a couple of years on alcohol, drugs, and human behavior. And the people that took that course, they got college credit, and they also got certified alcoholism credits. But I had to wait till I went to graduate school to learn about alcohol being a disease, and I wanted to make that easier for other people. So what I really enjoy doing, I love to do therapy, but I also love to just teach.
Wow, that's amazing. And you can tell, like, as you got into that experience yourself and you found the healing yourself, and then you found a way to reach out to others. But then you verified that alcoholism is there is a bigger picture behind it. Would you say it's a consequence of dysfunctional family, or is it something that will trigger a dysfunctional arrangement in the family?
Well, what we did when, it was in the 1980s, Janet Woiditz wrote a book called Adult Children of Alcoholics, and she came from New Jersey, and I started going to those conferences and taking my 12-year-old daughter because I wanted her to learn about alcoholism and to be with other teenagers. So then we learned about the characteristics that Janet talked about in an alcoholic home, that if you're raised in an alcoholic home, these are some of the characteristics that you have. You have difficulty following projects through from beginning to end. You lie when it would be just as easy to tell the truth. You judge yourself without mercy. You have difficulty having fun. You take yourself very seriously. You have difficulty with intimate relationships. And you overreact to changes beyond your control. You feel different from other people. You're either super responsible or super irresponsible, and you're extremely loyal, even in the face of evidence that the loyalty is undeserved. And you also lock yourself sometimes into a course of action without giving serious consideration to alternative behaviors or possible consequences, so you're impulsive. And then at the end, you'll also usually guess what normal is, because you don't really know what normal is. But really, normal is dysfunction. We're all dysfunctional on some level.
That's new to us. That's new. How so?
So, well, because we all, just let me continue a little bit. We're dysfunctional on some level because we've been raised with people who are dysfunctional, and they didn't know how to meet our emotional needs. And that is really the definition of a dysfunctional family. But it was first the definition of an alcoholic family. And so then you start teaching this and giving workshops, and people say, well, I didn't come from an alcoholic family. We didn't drink, but I have those characteristics, right? So then we found out that alcohol was just one type of a dysfunctional home and one type of a home where the children's emotional needs were not met because the parents are too busy fighting and arguing, and the mother is trying to get the father up and to work and making excuses with his boss about why he's not there, et cetera, et cetera. So she can only do so much with the kids, which is pretty much just take care of your daily needs, of food and, a warm place to live. And emotionally, you're just kind of hung out there to dry. So in a way, all of us, I mean, they say 95%, so I don't know where the other 5% live, to tell you the truth, because I only see the 95%.
So you would say this dysfunctionality is mostly related to our emotional life.
Yes.
And as you mentioned about some of the characteristics, would you say that there is a way to really heal? Would you say that generation by generation we would naturally heal from it and find some form of a more harmonious way of living in families?
Oh, certainly. That's the whole point of knowing that you come from dysfunction, is that how do I get over it? What are my dysfunctions? Like, how many of those characteristics do I have? And they're listed in my book, which I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yes,
too,
we will.
And you can find that in the second chapter. So how many do I have? Because once you know what the problem is or what your problems are, then you can start working on them.
So you're mentioning that the power really rely upon awareness. Once people bring it to consciousness, you have power to change. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So then in this book, you're not finished yet. It's about, as Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. talks about, it's about understanding addictions and dysfunctional family. It's very practical. I found it very practical for the reader, and it's very straightforward and I think very empowering as well. But can you tell us more about the behind the scenes of these problems? Because you talk about, for example, personality traits in dysfunctional homes and alcoholics. Can you tell us a little bit about these characteristics?
Well, the children take on certain roles in these families. And this is how it generally goes, but doesn't have to go in this order. But generally, the oldest child is the hero or the responsible child. And they are the ones, the teachers send the money down to the office using that child, and that child helps with the other kids in the family and takes care of them when mom and dad are fighting, et cetera, et cetera. And they usually bring pride to the family in some way because they do well with grades or they do well in sports. So the family is proud of them. The second child is called the scapegoat or the problem child, and they usually have some kind of dysfunction in that maybe they're not good at school, maybe they're sickly, maybe they're hard to discipline. But there's a problem with this child, and that's the child that usually brings the family into therapy because they'll say, we can't do anything with them, and they're usually teenagers by the time you get to see them. And I always tell that child that you brought them in here, but you're not the only one that has something going on. But we're going to find out what the other ones are doing, and that child usually is so relieved because they've been blamed for just about anything. They get blamed for things that they don't even do because they just get used to thinking, well, it's got to be that kid, right? The third child is the lost child, quiet, shy, and sensitive. And they spend a lot of times in their room, and they read a lot, more introverted, and they follow the other kids. So they're just quiet. And, nobody really pays much attention because they are so quiet. especially after the problem child, because the problem child gets a lot of attention in this family. And then the fourth child is the mascot or the clown, and they use humor, either positive or negative, to get attention. So they hide their feelings with humor. And then in some models, there's a fifth child called the placator child, and they just try to make everybody happy by doing things for other people. Now, usually we're a combination of two of those roles. And if you're an only child, you might play all of them at some point.
Wow.
But once you know that, too, what your role is in the family, then you can, like some people come in and they say, well, I was always the placater. I always took care of people. I was making dinner at 7, And so now they have trouble saying no as adults because they're always used to doing and doing. But they get tired. You get tired of doing and doing.
Of course. And
then the assumption is, well, these other people are going to help at some point, but they don't. If they're used to you doing it, they're just going to let you do it, most of the time.
Go ahead.
Well, anyway, the 3 rules that all of these children are brought up with is don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. So then those would be the things that we need to learn how to do. In adulthood, we need to learn to speak our mind, to say what we mean but not say it mean. We need to know who we can trust and who we can't trust. And we need to know how to talk about our feelings.
That's the key. We've been telling previous programs at Kardec Radio about talking about emotions, but it's not easy. For many people, it's such a taboo because it seems like when you talk about emotions, as they don't know how to deal with, they overreact and they push it away as if it's something so scary. So how do we go around it if people are at that level?
Well, I would think now if you're talking about alcoholism, number one, you can join Al-Anon, which is a free program. Alcoholics Anonymous, AA meetings, those are given for the alcoholic, the person who drinks. And then also there's Narcotics Anonymous meetings, NA. Well, both of those organizations you go to for free. And it's just like at church. I just pass the basket. You can put something in or you don't have to. And then each one of those has, they have Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. And so if you came from any of those two types of families, you can go to these meetings and you can just sit around and you don't have to say anything if you go to a meeting. You can just listen. And you learn how other people are handling certain things. And that's one way that people can get some free help is to go to either Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. And here in New Jersey, we do have Emotions Anonymous meetings, and it's called the 12-Step Program, just like Bill Wilson had 12 steps for Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first step was that you're powerless over alcohol. Well, then other people will say, well, I'm powerless over my emotion, and then how do I handle that? And in these programs, you can get a sponsor, somebody that will help you, work the steps. But a lot of people just go and they listen, for 2 or 3 months. They don't really say very much. And they don't allow crosstalk, meaning if you were to say something about what happened in your house today, and then we would just go on to the next person and they would say something. But after the meeting, someone might come up to you and say, I had that problem with my dad and this is what I did. They don't give advice. They just talk from their faith, hope, and experience. So that's certainly one thing that people could do, and you can go to Al-Anon meetings all over the world, and I believe Nar-Anon also. I'm not so sure about Emotions Anonymous, but church groups where sometimes they just have a 12-week class. I mean, sometimes even if you're only mildly interested in the subject, just go and you'll meet somebody, you'll meet friends, you'll meet people, and you can learn from other people. Use some person as a role model. That I really like the way Judy handled that, so I'm just going to kind of watch Judy, every time I come to the meeting and see how she does things. Because we didn't have positive role models in our families. We had people that were fighting and arguing. My mother was always angry. My father was usually hungover, trying to get back to work. My brothers, they went out to play. I mean, a lot of times in these families, the kids, they're not. The only time they're a cohesive group is if something's going wrong, like if Dad's drunk on the floor and they have to get him to bed. Then they'll all work together. And that's one of the reasons that people from dysfunction, they make wonderful helpers. They work in hospitals, they're nurses, they're ambulance people, because they're used to helping in their family.
That's interesting because as you're saying, like reaching out to others is also a way to heal ourselves. I remember seeing statistics about a scientific study talking about the alcoholics who wanted to join AA and they actually engaged into helping others, reaching out to others. They healed and they really maintained their stability, their power over alcohol than others who didn't do much of reaching out to others who were experiencing similar experience. Is that something that you also observe?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what therapy is. You come and you talk. And when you go to a meeting, you might not talk, but you listen first because it's not safe to talk. But then eventually you learn how to talk. And people, even if you just talk after the meeting or you go to the diner for a cup of coffee, it's a beginning of coming out of the isolation that you think you're so weird because of what happened in your house.
So you're telling everybody, like, it happens in most families, the dysfunctionality, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So, Reverend Karen, we're going to give a short break, but when we come back, we'd like to discuss more about something that you talk about in your book about defense mechanisms, the inner child, as you entitled in the chapter, Only the Shadow Knows, okay?
Okay, great.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Keep emotional control under all circumstances. An unbalanced nervous system means an unbalanced life. If difficulties threaten your balance, utilize prayer. Prayer is effective medicine for all the illnesses of the soul.
Available for purchase the book, This Obsession, psychographed by the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier. In this book, the spirit André Luiz recruits new groups of workers of goodness whose intent is to aid in the readjustment of those no longer in the physical plane. Learn more by purchasing your copy at www.sgny.org.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Listen to our sister radio, Bazera Online Web Radio, retransmitting Kardec radio shows 3 times a day. Also beautiful and inspiring programs in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to www.spiritist.com.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we are back with Reverend Karen Herrick. She has been working extensively with dysfunctional families. She actually has a clinic herself, and she has been working in New Jersey. You can log on to her website, www.karenherrick.com, KarenHerrick.com, and get to know more about the amazing works of reaching out to families and children and couples who go through problems with alcohol and dysfunctional homes as a whole. But also, we're going to talk about in the third part of the program, this is just a teaser, she's going to talk about how spirituality is the final stage of recovery. This is something that is probably the highlight for all of us here at Kardec Radio. She's the president of the Academy for Spiritual and Consciousness Studies. She has a lot to share with us. It's beyond just psychology. It's about spiritual psychology. Now, Reverend Herrick, we here see in one of your chapters in the book, You're Not Finished Yet, that you talk about the unconscious our defense mechanisms, our inner child, and the positive rules for therapy and for life. Can you tell us more how these steps into healing will bring awareness of these elements in our lives, please?
Right. Well, defense mechanisms are things that we do in order not to feel bad and not to feel guilt. So I talk about, the ones that I talk about are the ones, now denial, especially from an alcoholic home. You've heard denial all over the place. Like my father used to say, I didn't drink that much last night. I don't drink as much as your brother. You know, on and on. They're always denying, and in doing that, they keep themselves innocent. But we all know that they were drunk because we saw them, you know, put their face in the plate or whatever they did that was so bizarre. And then I think that's why many times people coming from alcoholic homes, they find it easy to lie because they're watching somebody who's denying constantly that they do have a problem. So that's one thing that we have lived with. Projection is when we displace our feelings, usually belonging to us or our parents, onto other people. So if I'm cheap and I don't know it, I might go out to lunch with you and I might say, oh, God, she was so cheap, she didn't leave very much for a tip, you know. So you have to kind of watch what you're saying about other people, because you really might be saying, that really might be true for you, but you're projecting it onto your best friend. Kind of interesting. Intellectualization, a lot of people from dysfunction use this one, where they just intellectualize concepts and talk about, you know, maybe they were beaten as a child, but they tell it like it's a story about somebody else, and you don't have any feeling. But if you intellectualize things, what you're doing is you're not feeling it. You're just talking about it. So you can usually tell what kind of people have flat affect, where you know, they're not really showing you much emotion. And that's what's great. I used to run a lot of groups every week, and now I have one group. But people that come here that eventually do their individual therapy, I put them in group therapy. And it's hard getting them into a group therapy setting, but once you get them in, you can't get them out, because they've never been in a group hardly where people just talk about their feelings and tell you things they've never told anybody else, and trust you know, not to tell anybody, and eventually you trust them not to tell, you know. And that's how we learn how to overcome a lot of the defense mechanisms that we have. And that's another thing that any kind of a group will do for you, as long as it's a healthy group. Now, the inner child, I use that concept a lot, and actually it comes from Carl Jung. He was a psychologist from Switzerland, and he worked with Freud for about 6 years, and then he left because he couldn't abide what Freud said, that all of our libido or energy was tied up to sex. He said it was tied up with spirituality and sexuality and a lot of other things. And Freud wouldn't move from his position, so they just had to break off their friendship. So, but Carl Jung talks about the inner child and how important a child is as a symbol. And he uses a lot of symbols from your dreams, from your culture, just any place, what symbols are important to you. But so I use the inner child, where I try to get my clients to talk to their little boy or little girl. And we talk about, you know, when some of the dysfunction happened, how old were you when that happened to you? And, well, the person might say 5. So, and I say, well, can you remember what you look like at 5? Oh, yeah, I remember. Okay, well, I want you to see yourself, you know, in your mind's eye. And then I want you to ask this little boy or this little girl, you know, how did they feel when that happened to them? And more than just asking them, I would like you to take your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you would write that question on a piece of paper to them. You know, how did you feel when you saw Daddy knock over the Christmas tree and on Christmas when you were 5 years old? And, you know, and then the child takes your non-dominant hand and prints the answer. And I have clients, they're very resistant to doing this, because they'll say, oh, I can't even read my printing. And I'll say, well, nobody has to read your printing. If you know what it says, then just translate it for me so that you can tell me when you come back. But it's very important to talk to this child who was abandoned so early by their own parents. And now, though, you are the adult that is going to raise this child into adulthood.
That's interesting you're mentioning this, because I know many people who want to adopt, and they say, oh, but I'm so afraid. I heard stories about the trauma they go through, and I think, you know, by the time they come to us, they're going to bring a lot of these things, and we're not going to be able to help them overcome the dysfunctionality they went through before they came to our home. So you're saying that therapeutically speaking, there is a way to heal it.
Yes, but if you have a child you've adopted from some type of dysfunction, the best help to get for them is some play therapy or sand tray therapy, where the therapist actually, has a whole sand tray in her office, and the child, they have all these little people and, cars and trucks and all this stuff, and they do therapy like that for a child, and they can go through the trauma and come out the other end very easily. Or arts therapy is wonderful, where the child draws, and then the therapist and the child go over what they drew, and then the therapist has them draw other things that would be more empowering for them.
But to talk to our children, we first need the couple be familiar with and be open to talking about their emotions. Usually women are more open than men, probably because of the cultural settings and the historical features as well, right? But I think it's changing, is it not?
Yes. We have more men coming into therapy, and, you see it on television. I mean, even if it's a humorous show, men are in therapy. We had the Sopranos show here in New Jersey years ago, and more men went into therapy because of that show. It was just amazing. So, they just need a little push, I think.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes life in itself is the push for it all.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's right. They get sick and tired of being sick and tired, so they come.
And that's a healthy thing. So when you talk about in your book, you start merging into a more spiritual aspect to the healing of dysfunctional families. So where does the spiritual element come and plays a role into this?
Well, what I usually ask them when I first see them during the first or second session, what religion were they raised, and where did their parents take them or their grandparents, and they, especially because they know I'm a reverend, they'll say, I'm not religious, and I'll say, no, that's okay. I'm not religious either. So, but what do you believe? What were you taught, and what have you kept from that? So some of them will say nothing. In fact, that caused more trauma because, maybe they were abused by a nun or a priest or whatever. Okay, well, what do you believe? What helps you, through your day? How have you been getting help? I know that in the beginning when I came from my dysfunctional family, I did not believe there was a God because I figured with what was going on in our house, God wouldn't be interested. And so, but I knew there was something about the wind and the American Indians, and so that's where I went. And I love nature and I like to garden, so I decided there had to be this energy behind the wind. And so that was really kind of what I prayed to. And where I would go, I would walk out in nature if I was upset. But that's a start on spirituality. And so anything that they tell me, like one gal was raised Catholic and she really doesn't, use it that much anymore. But when she runs, she has a rosary ring. And it's a ring and it has the Stations of the Cross on it. And she says the rosary as she runs. And so, that's what she does for her spiritual practice. And I try to eventually have them meditate, to, go into mindfulness where they just sit and just breathe in and out, which is very difficult for some of them to do because they really do have the monkey mind of, they're constantly thinking. Because when you come from a dysfunctional family, you have this thinking addiction. You think if you can think about it enough, you can control it. So
very rational.
Yeah, right. They are very black and white many times. So I try to go where the client is about spirituality, and that's more as I ask the question in the beginning, and then if it's appropriate, I will bring that in to try to help them. Well, maybe you could pray for your sister this week and see if you don't feel better about your relationship with her, and come back and let me know if you've had any dreams or. If they will pray. A lot of them, they don't even believe in praying, so that I stay away from that. It really just depends on what the person tells me. But I think it's also good, just generally, to have a little book that you read. Just read something in the morning that's positive, and if it isn't spiritual, just positive. So you read some positive thoughts to start your day. And then when things are going too well, maybe you could go back to that positive thought that you read this morning and you really liked it. And then I try to have them at the end of the day write down, what they liked about the day, what they didn't like, what would they do differently if they had it to do over. So I do a lot of writing exercises, or I ask them to do a lot of writing exercises. Some of them don't necessarily want to write, but that is I think the healthiest thing you could do for yourself is just to write every day for 20 minutes. And you don't even have to know what you're going to write about, but write down your thoughts, your feelings, what happened. If you're angry at your neighbor, write it down. And you say, well, what good is that going to do? Well, it puts it in another place in your body when you write it down.
That's interesting. So it becomes like therapeutic, because some people, they have a hard time going straight to the therapist. So you can probably, by exercising, writing about what they are feeling and how they are thinking about things, would probably open them up for probably a deeper step. Is that correct? Or
absolutely, that's correct. So a lot of this you can do, on your own. I mean, I have a client, when I asked her to do the inner child writing, she found, those composition books, the black and white ones they used to have in schools, some of them. Well, they come in all colors. And so she found like a yellow composition books, and she bought like 6 of them. And that's, in those books, she writes to her little girl, and her little girl writes back. And she said, now she's got 7 volumes of what the child has written to her. And she said, that child knows a lot. and she says, and it's free. I said, I know.
Well, spiritually speaking, for us who believe in the immortality of the soul, you'd say that the baggage from probably previous lives, previous experiences is coming about as you write as well, even if it's more subconscious, unconscious level.
Oh, yes. And I will ask them, too, which I don't think a lot of therapists do. But because I am spiritually bent, I will say, do you believe in past lives? Do you believe in everlasting life? Would you go to a medium? And I try to get them to go to mediums if they have a lot of grief, because hopefully that person, their dead loved one, will come through. And it really does help. It helps in a lot of chronic grief that I push them a little bit to do those kinds of things if they're willing.
Of course, it's a step-by-step process.
Yes, and so spirituality is the final stage. But it isn't that black and white where we wait till, you've been here 3 years till we talk about spirituality. I'm always bringing it in and out and weaving it. And then eventually the ones that, really work on themselves, they become very spiritual at the end, which I just love.
Wow, that's great. So we're going to give a short break, Reverend Herrick, but when we come back, we're going to immerse ourselves into how spirituality can bring healing to dysfunction and alcoholic families, okay?
We will return to our program after these messages.
A new masterpiece has just been released by EDI-CEI of America, Memoirs of a Suicide by Yvonne Pereira. A phenomenal book about what happens to suicides in the afterlife. Truly instructive, it brings greater hope that no one really dies or spends eternity in damnation. A true account of the mercy and providence of God. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Come for the beautiful event sponsored by the British Union of the Spiritist Societies. It is the second British Spiritist Congress on May 11th and 12th at the Quakers Friends House in London, United Kingdom. For more information, please go to www.buss.org.uk.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Are you seeking a way to tap into more spiritual you? Try meditation. As the Spirit Joanne D'Angelo says, meditation becomes an effective way to discipline the will. In the meditative state, You calm down your emotions and clarify your discernment, harmonizing your feelings. Take a listen to a clip from the CD entitled Health by Divaldo Franco and Joanna De Angelis.
So say this: I am life, and a triumphant life. Say it again, and once again. Say, I am happiness in life. Repeat it. I am fulfilled, and so I shall remain. Look at yourself. You are irradiating His light. Again, look at yourself. You are irradiating His light. Breathe it. Hold it. Breathe out. Say to yourself, nothing of a disturbing nature deserves my attention.
If you want to listen to more, you can purchase your own copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org/bookstore.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we are here talking about healing dysfunctional families. And of course, if you have questions, you can email to us at cardiacradio@gmail.com or go straight to our website, cardiacradio.com, and send us a request. If you want to talk directly to Dr. and Reverend Karen Herrick, you can go to her website, www.karenherrick.com, or email to her, Karen@KarenHerrick.com. If you go to cardiacradio.com website, you can click the very link regarding her program here at Cardiac Radio, and it's going to direct you to the very website of hers. She's also the president of the Academy for Spiritual and Consciousness Studies. She actually did her PhD thesis on naming spiritual experiences. So she went deeper and deeper to the point that she found out, as she says in her book, You're Not Finished Yet, that spirituality is the final stage for recovery. And Reverend Herrick, one of the very intriguing parts of this book is on page 99. This is probably a personal opinion, but intriguing in the good sense of the word, because it teases the reader to open up to spirituality, I would say, when you talk about alcoholics who were and are looking for spirit. And I will just quote an excerpt from Carl Gustav Jung that you mention in this book. Carl Jung replied by saying his craving for alcohol was the equivalent of a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union with God. You see, alcohol in Latin is spiritus, and you see the same word for the highest religious experience as well as for the most depraving poison. The helpful formula here is spiritus contra spiritum. What is that all about? That's
Isn't
so
that
interesting.
Great?
It is wonderful.
Well,
so
what he
insightful.
said was, yeah, that the alcoholic was looking for spirit, but he instead imbibed it. He drank it. And so that the key to finding their spirituality would be a spiritual program. And that quote came from a letter that he wrote to Bill Wilson, who was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1933. Mm-hmm. And Bill Wilson had been a stockbroker for 22 years, and he was a drunk. He that's what he called himself. And his wife had money when they married. I don't think she had much when when they both were elderly, but because she was supporting him a lot in his life because he would drink and go on binges and wouldn't work, and she always worked. Anyway, he believed that he had never gone to a mental hospital because his wife had always put him in a hospital, a regular hospital with a private doctor when he needed to dry out. So he had this rather arrogant attitude that he wasn't really an alcoholic, because in the 30s they would put you in a mental hospital if you were, a drunk. So anyway, this one time he's in the hospital and his doctor comes in and says, you've been doing this for 22 years and I've been doing this with you. And it isn't helping. You're just getting worse because alcohol is a progressive disease. So if you come back to me again to be dried out, I'm going to put you in a mental hospital. Well, that just killed his ego. And so that night he got down on his knees and he prayed, if there is a God, please take away my desire to drink. And he said that the room filled up with light, and that he felt his craving for alcohol disappear. And he felt this breath of air, but of spirit. The breath was of spirit go through him. So to me, he had, a Holy Spirit experience. And then he went to sleep. Well, he wakes up in the morning and he says to the doctor the next day, well, maybe I hallucinated that. And the doctor said, well, maybe you did. He said, but I'm a medical doctor. I don't know anything about that. But he said, whatever happened to you last night, he said, I would stay with it because you look better today than I've ever seen you look.
Wow.
And then his friend Ebby was a real alcoholic because he was poor and he always went into mental hospitals. He was also recovering, and he came to visit Bill in the hospital, and he had William James's book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, with him.
Wow.
And he said to Bill, no, he said, that wasn't a hallucination. You had a religious experience. So anyway, Bill had been going to the Oxford group, which was a group of a Protestant church in New York City, and they met in people's homes, and they were studying the life of Christ in the first 100 years with the disciples. And so he liked the group, and he used it to go when he wanted to drink. And that's not what it was for. And then he was going down to hospitals, and he was volunteering his time to talk to other drunks, and he said it made him feel better. So anyway, so he devised from the Oxford group, they had 6 steps, and they had little slogans. And out of those 6 steps, he eventually derived the 12 steps of AA, the first step being I am powerless over alcohol, which means I don't take the first drink. Because if you take the first drink, then the drink then takes the next drink. And then he wrote to Carl Jung, and he said he had this experience in his room, and that's what Carl was talking about, was that every alcoholic needed to have some kind of a spiritual experience. And so then we go back to William James, who said you could have a very meaningful, immediate spiritual experience, like a white light in your bedroom, or you could just have a normal kind that took years for you to develop your spiritual side. So that is a very important part of recovery from the disease of alcoholism. Now, also what happens is when we live in these dysfunctional homes, they've done studies that show that we disassociate a lot living in these homes. So you just kind of space out, so you don't have to listen to mom and dad fighting. And because you disassociate a lot, then you learn how to do that. You can just kind of leave your body if you want to, if you get really good at it. Then in adulthood, if you're in a car accident and you've been in one of these dysfunctional homes, what happens is that you're more apt to have a near-death experience, or you're more apt to have an out-of-body experience because you did all that disassociation while you were growing up.
So it makes so much sense that traumatic experiences will create some form of altered consciousness, conscious states in our lives. And in your book, you say that we should at some point explore and question ourselves about the spiritual experiences. But we have a question here, Reverend Herrick, that was sent by a Kardec Radio listener about whether or not spiritual experiences are simply a byproduct of these traumatic, dysfunctional experiences in their lives and families, or it's something that is symptomatic, but it's not actually a simple byproduct of it.
I think it's more a simple byproduct of it. I'll just give you an example. Dr. Moody, who you mentioned before, one of the words that I learned from him in his book The Last Laugh, which is the best book if you want to read about Raymond Moody, because that's he didn't have the publisher change anything in that book. He talks about the word pretergression. Now, so preter, P-R-E-T-E-R, and that means to come before. Gression, to regress. So anyway, I asked him for some examples of that, and he kind of talked around it and, told me what it was, but he never gave me a concrete example that day that I asked him. So I was thinking about it, and I was running spirituality groups at that time, and I started to do that for my PhD, and it was supposed to last 12 weeks, and that one spirituality group, they signed up every 12 weeks for 3 years. So we learned a lot about different spiritual experiences. And anyway, there was this one woman, and she had been raised Catholic, and she had been born on Wednesday. So one of the things that she said about her childhood was, Wednesday's child is full of woe. And she was depressed. So anyway, we gave her all kinds of affirmations to use instead of that. That I am worthy, and I am one of God's children, and I am loved, and I'm easily loved. And so anyway, it was right after Christmas, and she came back into the group, after the holiday, and she said that she had been very depressed after Christmas. And this one Sunday, she had done all the things that we always talked about. You have tea, you take a walk, you have a warm bath, you read a book, you call a friend, all those things. Nothing worked. So she decided to sit down and to meditate. So she did. And in this meditation, the 3 kings came to her, and they brought her gifts, and they bowed in front of her, and they were honoring her birth. And she said, it was just beautiful. And when it was over, her depression was gone. Wow. So now if we brought that into another group, they would have listened politely, but there would have been a lot of people thinking, oh, this is weird, right? But in a spirituality group, this was really a breakthrough. So anyway, I was thinking about what Raymond said, that the old, something that you've learned, the old information that you have, predigresses into you. So the 3 kings, she was taught as a child that the 3 kings came, right? So the 3 kings came to her to meditation because that's what she was used to in her culture. They gave her a gift. They made her feel better. It was a symbol of, that she was a worthy person. And because they did that, because that came from her culture and from her old religion, she could use that, and it lifted her out of mental illness. So it's just one example, but I loved it because I told it to Raymond, and he loved it too. He said, that's it, Karen, that's it. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting. Now, I think that's the whole point of the paranormal, that we have all these paranormal experiences, and we get symbols. And it's very important what symbol you get. You would get a different symbol than I would get. And you might, something completely different might happen to you.
So you're saying that there is a role, and we should not take it for granted, because many people have those experiences, and they either take it for granted or they obsess about it, but they don't use it as a therapeutic process for them.
That's right. So I said, it was after Christmas, we all had pictures of the 3 kings, and I, suggested she make a collage, she have them on her refrigerator. I said, this is an important symbol for you. This symbol, came from spirit, that you are worthy. And so that's what she did. She used that a lot, and she wasn't very depressed anymore.
It's quite interesting, and as you're saying, there are many accounts in that regard of people who paid attention to their spiritual experiences and they healed. Now, you talk about 2 things that for us at Kardec Radio are so vital for our audience. It's about spiritual intervention. You talk about angels, let's say the higher spirits, whatever way we want to name it, and reincarnation. How these 2 elements would probably play a role in the healing of dysfunctional families?
Okay, well, number 1, most people believe in guardian angels, and so that's a very good thing. Because they believe they have one, and they can pray to their guardian angel and other angels that might be around for help. And I think that's important, that you have something that's higher than you. It's like some people might not necessarily believe in God so much, but they will believe in angels. So I think angels are very important, and people do see angels, and angels do come to them, at night. So that's all I can really tell you about it, is that so many people will go there with me, to the angel part. The reincarnation, I think probably about 30% to 35% of my people believe in reincarnation. And many times they'll bring me dreams that after we talk about it, we decided it is a reincarnation dream, because they are much more vivid. Just like if you have a dream of your dead father who comes to you at night, that dream is more vivid also. So, and many times when they get involved in these, we could call them addictive relationships, but they seem so passionate, I will talk to them about, do you think that you knew this person before? And if you did, oh, yeah, we've talked about that. We probably knew each other in France, we've decided. Okay, well, I believe that. So let's talk about, what do you think happened in France, and what do you think we're going to do here? And just kind of use that in the therapy.
Exactly.
But when you ask people these things, they tell you whether they believe in it or not. Or, well, maybe I believe this part of it, but I don't believe that part of it. And so then you can kind of broaden their experience a bit by giving them an article or suggesting a book, or they listen to your radio show. Whatever you have them do, you're educating them. And they like that. They like to be given tasks, and I give a lot of homework.
Oh, that's great. So exercises so people go home and keep working on it. So you empower them to their own independence, because some therapists, they sometimes keep the person so dependent on that external input that they don't empower the person to one day live well by themselves.
Oh, no. We want them to get better. We do.
Exactly.
And then sometimes they come back, once a year, life coach, or, you hear from them at Christmas. It's really great.
So have you experienced at any point when you are doing your clinical practice the presence of either feeling or ostensibly perceiving the presence of these guardian angels operating upon, like, trying to help the person whom you're treating?
Well, I call that chill therapy. So when I am talking to them, and I'm getting a little chill right now, but I'll get chilled, and I'll know that this is what I'm supposed to be saying to them. And I just love that. And they can experience it too. And when I tell them that happens to me, then sometimes they'll say, I'm feeling chilled. Okay, well, let's listen. What did we just say? Because that's important. And one day, a long time ago, and I wish I had kept better notes on this, but I had a client who was multiple personality disorder. And she was coming to me, and she came in one day, and right away her face changed, just like you see in the movies. Her face changes, and then it just looks like it's a different person from the face up sitting there with you. And this was her spiritual self that came to me. And I didn't know that much then about spirituality as I do now, but I knew that this person was pure. It was just phenomenal how pure she was. And she told me all about my client, and she told me that what I was trying to help her with in therapy was exactly what had happened to her as a child, even though I don't think my client ever really got there and believed it. But it's okay, because we were going along, and she got very healthy. But it was interesting, in this part of her, the spiritual part, stayed about, I'd say, 25 minutes. Excuse me. And then she said to me, and you realize that I don't drive. And I said, yes, I understand, which meant please get the other person back who drives. Because if I stay in this state, I can't drive her home.
Oh.
It was absolutely phenomenal. I wish I could have taken that, because that was her angelic self. It was just beautiful.
Yes, what an experience. So, of course, according to the client, as they are more open to it, you can more easily go into these aspects if they believe in it, if they practice it. You work around it. I remember Dr. Harry Canning from Duke University talking about the importance of doing what you've told us at the beginning of the program, that you ask about the spiritual pathway of the person, of any type of religiousness. So giving them encouragement to go there and use it as a therapeutic tool for their own healing.
Yes.
Exactly.
You empower them that way.
You empower them, exactly. So you don't rule it out or just leave it aside. On the contrary, you bring it so the person can use it as a very powerful tool to the healing.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm. So, Reverend Herrick, we are rejoicing here about the whole experience of yourself and how much work you have done and how much knowledge, especially in this book that is so practical and hands-on for anybody who either would like to know more about the healing of dysfunctional families in general. You're not finished yet. And if people want to get access to this, they can go to Dr. and Reverend Karen Herrick's website, www.karenherrick.com, and get to know more about the book and the practice. Reverend Herrick, we are very thankful for your presence. Would you like to share a final message for especially those listeners who are here and have their hearts so tight because they've been through and they are willing to give a first step into their own healing?
Yes, and I just would like to say that if they want to order their book, they should go to Amazon.com.
Okay.
And that's where the best place, and they can also get it on ebook. But what I would say to someone is, it's important, if you don't want to lose connection with people, to keep them in your thoughts and to think loving thoughts for that person, which is really what love is. Surround them in some white light as you're thinking about them if you're having trouble with them. And just think about them in a positive way. And sometimes how that helps you is when you do have a meeting with them, it goes a little bit better because you have been thinking positive things and sending them love. Love is the most important vibration. It is the way mediums work. It's the love that makes the spirit want to connect with their loved ones here on earth and vice versa. So I would just say to try to read loving thoughts and to try to write. And if you're not writing loving thoughts, fine. Write out all your anger. Write it out. And then at the end, just say a little prayer for that person and for yourself. And I think that would help you have a better day.
That's beautiful. And as you say in your book, whatever purpose it is, find it, because everyone has a purpose. So it's very empowering. We are very thankful for your presence here at Kardec Radio, and we truly hope we can have you here more often. Thank you very much, Reverend Herrick.
Thank you for having me.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Come and listen to our CD, Unfolding Our Spiritual Nature, Path of Harmony, by Dr. Raul Teixeira. The CD has questions and answers on euthanasia, suicide, pain relief, past life therapy, prayer and better attunement, law and affinity, the spirit world, raising our thoughts, and much more. You can purchase the CD by visiting SSB online bookstore at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Known as one of the most scientific books by Allan Kardec, The Genesis dives deeper into the origins of our planet to the advent of the new generations to come. Purchase your copy today, online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Louise, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Spiritist Moment. We are studying Part 3 of the Spirit's book. We are studying about the divine natural laws. We are studying this because we wish to be happy, as the Spirits tell us that these are the laws that will guide us, that we will find our happiness through these laws. In Part 3 of the Spirit's book, more specific, the law of destruction is what we have been studying the past couple of weeks. And it's interesting because the Spirits couldn't be more inspiring, or more aligned. Because this week, some natural disasters happened, and our hearts go out to all those who suffered such disasters in Oklahoma. We send our good vibrations to them. So we know that as we study the law of destruction, bringing this to those who are currently suffering isn't necessarily comforting. Let us be honest. Someone who has just lost their home, perhaps a loved one, or everything that they own in a material sense, at least their physical home, cars, clothing, is gone. So to read to them number 737 of the Spirit's book, For What Purpose Does God Inflict Humankind with Destructive Calamities, wouldn't necessarily touch their heart. But what the spirits are about to tell us is what we believe will begin to emerge out of the rubble of this disaster, natural disaster that occurred. Let us read the answer and reflect together. The spirits say to impel them to progress more quickly. Haven't we stated that destruction is necessary for the moral regeneration of spirits who accomplish a new degree of perfection during each new existence? You must see the end in order to appreciate the results. You only judge such things from your own personal point of view, and you regard such afflictions as calamities because of the injury they cause you. However, these hardships are often necessary in order to make things arrive in a better order more quickly and to accomplish in a few years what would have otherwise required many centuries. End quote. So it is very deep and profound what the spirits share with us. But one of the things in the beginning of the answer, they say that it is necessary for moral regeneration. So for sure, one of the things that often come out of natural disasters is we see communities begin to come together. Whereas before, perhaps neighbors of different neighborhoods may not have come together, but are now coming together. They're now helping one another in the spirit of service, because each one has suffered the same in some way, shape, or form. Some greater than others, some less, but each coming together with this air of camaraderie and a desire to help one another through these difficult times, thereby propelling a whole neighborhood, a whole section of people to be more loving, more kind. The spirits also share something else with us. They share with us that when we are enduring our hardship, when we are enduring these disasters, these trials, our perspective might be limited. We might not see the purpose in it all while we are enduring it. And we see these hardships or these so-called afflictions as calamities, as great suffering, as the spirits are telling us, because we do not see the bigger picture. But if we could see the bigger picture and see that in the end of all of this, a great moral fortitude will arise within us, and we'll begin to give value to what is most important in our lives. Allow us to briefly share a story we heard today about a group of people in a different neighborhood who were not affected by the tornado in Oklahoma. They went and drove a couple of hours to help those in this particular neighborhood that got really badly hit. And as they approached this disaster area, where basically an entire neighborhood was leveled, and in the rubble, they found a very large, broken down sign, but it had a huge message on it that said, "The most important things in life are not things." So, dear friends, let us meditate about that. Until we meet again next time, we wish you many blessings.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to the segment Spiritist in Your Life. Today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the gospel. It is interesting that so many of us try to find answers every day, all the time in our lives. And you hear people asking how to solve a problem, how to go through difficulties, how to be a better person, what to do to climb the steps for inner transformation in our elevation. And there's one book that's going to bring all this enlightenment for us. And it's here It's accessible. Anyone can have it. Anyone can read it. But very few people know that. And this book is called The Gospel of Jesus Christ. Allan Kardec, knowing that and guided by many illuminated spirits, compiled the Gospel according to Spiritism, which brings to us many important moral teachings that will help us in a clear, concise, and an interesting way explain to us the maxims and the teachings of Jesus. And as Allan Kardec says in the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism, the Gospel is composed of 5 different parts. The number 1 represents the ordinary events in the life of Christ, and we have many descriptions of that. And then there are the miracles. Number 3, the prophecies. Number 4, the words that were used and served for establishing the dogmas of the Church and many other religious institutions. And number 5, the moral teachings. The first 4 have been the object of controversy, dispute, arguments, different interpretations, and this will still take many, many years for us to really understand the meaning of those. But the 5th and last one, the moral teachings, there's nothing to argue, discuss. There's no controversy. There are very clear, straightforward messages. They are so important in our daily lives. And as Allan Kardec says, before this divine code, this belief itself bows down. It is ground upon which all sects can meet, the banner under which all may take shelter, whatever their beliefs may be, for it has never been the object of religious dispute, which has always and in all places originated from matters of dogma. Moreover, in arguing over such matters, sects would find in the moral teachings their own condemnation, because most of them are more attached to the mystical aspect than to the moral, which demands the reform of the self. Dear listeners, the Gospel according to Spiritism brings many passages, especially some that are very difficult to understand, not in a chronological order, but organized based on their meanings and their teachings, and clustered together, followed by explanations from the spirits. And this is an incredible resource for any of us if you want to understand these teachings. They're so important in our daily lives. But some of you might be asking, well, is there a strategy? Is there something I can do to get the benefits of understanding the gospel, or in other words, bringing the gospel to my life? And the answer is very simple. Study the gospel in your home. Dedicate a time and a day of the week that you can spend some time reading and studying and meditating the messages from the gospel. We call that the gospel at home. Here's what some spirits say about the gospel at home. Emmanuel emphasized the importance of this practice and says that the gospel at home is not a mere novelty. It is a necessity everywhere where Christianity has set down roots of improvement and sublimation. When the Master's teachings are alive between the 4 walls of a home, small sacrifices weave common happiness. Bezerra de Menezes, in the book Temas da Vida by Chico Xavier, says, "Let us work to implement the gospel at home as much as we can. To bring the light of the good tidings into a family's home is to improve all the qualities that the earthly experience can offer us." And there are many benefits in doing the gospel at home. Not only will enable you to understand these Christian teachings in detail and start to practice them, but also create in the home this habit of meeting as a family, awakening and increasing the sentiment of fraternity amongst family members. It also enables the members in a moment of peace and union, providing a peaceful and balanced existence together. Will cleanse the home with elevated thoughts and sentiments, and facilitating the influence of messengers of the good. We will also facilitate in and outside the home the necessary support in material and spiritual difficulties by actively observing the principles of vigilance and prayer. It will increase the vibrational pattern of family members, helping the spiritual world in making the earth a better place. And finally, it will make the gospel known, understood, felt, and exemplified in every setting. And there's a lot more to it. Just try it. Start taking the moment to study the gospel and live by it. Practice it. Charity, love. This is what Jesus said, and this is what we have to do. Thank you very much, and so be it.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want to find a good way to explain life after physical death to kids or teenagers? Check out the book Message from a Teen in the Spirit World by the Spirit Neo Lucio and psychographed by Chico Xavier. In this book, a teenager named Carlos explains his impressions on the new life in the spirit realm with his discarnate relatives and new friends. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Listen to our sister radio, Bazera Online Web Radio, retransmitting Kardec radio shows 3 times a day. Also, beautiful and inspiring programs in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to www.spiritist.com.
In the book, A Primer on Being Good by the Spirit May, psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, explains in simple language appropriate for children 2 paths in life, the path of good or the path of evil. God has granted us the freedom to choose either one. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Now we return to our program.
Dear listener, and here we are again reading together the 2nd chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism, entitled My Kingdom is Not of This World. The subtitle, item 4, we are going to comment today is the regality of Jesus. Let's first read the only paragraph Kardec writes about it. We quote, "We can all recognize that the kingdom of Jesus is not of this world. But could he not also have a kingdom on earth? The title of king does not always imply temporary authority. We give this title by unanimous consent to anyone who by their own talent rises to the highest level of whatever idea, who dominates his time or influences human progress. In this way, we frequently use the expression the king or prince for philosophers, artists, poets, writers, etc. Does not this kind of royalty, coming from personal merit or having been consecrated by posterity, reveal in many cases a supremacy far greater than that which circles the royal crown? The first is imperishable, whereas The second is but a toy of the vicissitudes. The generations which followed the first always bless themselves, whereas sometimes those who follow the second have cause to curse. The earthly one extinguishes with life, but the sovereignty of morality continues and maintains its reign, ruling above all after death. From this aspect, then, is not Jesus a mightier and more powerful king than all the sovereigns on the earth? It was with good reason, then, that he said to Pilate, I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world. Now, dear friend, this topic gives way to a very, very important characteristic of Spiritism. In the Spirit's book, in the first book put together by Allan Kardec on the Spirit's teachings, there is a key question whose answer is not less fundamental to anyone who is trying to understand the link between the Spiritist doctrine and Jesus' teachings. The question you're talking about is question 625. Allan Kardec asks the higher spirits, in my opinion, one of the most important questions in the whole book. There we go. What is the most perfect type that God has offered to man as his guide and model? The answer is short. Jesus. Well, my friend, look. A guide is someone we have to follow. A model is someone we have to copy. By saying that Jesus Christ is the guide and model of humanity, is the perfect type that God has offered to man, the spirits are saying that, morally speaking, he is regarded as God, because he comprises all the moral teachings God has to us, conveyed through Jesus Christ to us. But on the other hand, philosophically, the Spiritists, they have the question number one of the Spirit's book, when Allan Kardec asks, what is God? And the answer is, God is the supreme intelligence, the primary cause of all things. But when Kardec says this, for us, philosophically speaking, it's difficult to understand that Jesus could be the creator of all the galaxies in the universe and be at the same time here with us. It's just a philosophical point. But morally, which is really what matters, Jesus is our moral God. That's what, in other words, Kardec comments. We quote, Jesus is the type of moral perfection to which man may attain upon this earth. God offers him to our thought as our most perfect model, and the doctrine taught by him is the purest expression of the divine law. So this makes Spiritism a doctrine that follows the teachings of Jesus. But be careful, my friend. Be careful. We are not saying that Spiritism is walking hand in hand with all the mistakes Christianity has made in the past more than 1,000 years. No. On the contrary, the spirits come with one interpretation, a moral interpretation of the gospel, first, and a spiritual interpretation of the gospel, second. Because Jesus hasn't come to teach us Spiritist truth. We were not psychologically prepared for that. But he came to teach us human relationships, love. That's why the Spirit of truth, he says, love each other. This is the first commandment. The second, instruct yourselves. Thank you so much.
The following partial recording is from The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec. The Origin and Nature of Spirits. Question number 76. How may we define spirits?
We can say that spirits are the intelligent beings of creation. They populate the universe beyond the material world.
Question number 77. Are spirit beings distinct from the divinity, or are they only emanations or portions of the divinity, the reason why they are called the children of God?
Good gracious, of course they are God's work. It is like a man who builds a machine, for example. The machine is the man's work, but it is not the man himself. You know that when individuals make nice and useful things, they call them their children, their creation. Well then, it is the same with God. We are God's children because we are products of the divine work.
Question number 78. Did spirits have a beginning, or have they existed from all eternity like God?
If spirits had no beginning, they would be equal to God. On the contrary, they are God's creation and subject to the divine will. God has existed from all eternity. That is incontestable. But we know nothing as to when and how we spirits were created. You could say that we had no beginning if you mean that since God is eternal, then God must have always and unceasingly created spirits. Nevertheless, when and how each of us was created individually, I repeat, no one knows. It is a mystery.
Question number 79. Since there are two general elements in the universe, that is, the intelligent element and the material element, could we say that spirits are formed from the intelligent element, while inert bodies are formed from the material element?
Obviously, spirits are individualizations of the intelligent principle, just as bodies are individualizations of the material principle. It is the time and manner of this formation that we do not know.
Question number 80. Is the creation of spirits continuous, or did it only occur at the beginning of time?
It is continuous, which means that God has never ceased creating them.
Question number 81. Are spirits formed spontaneously, or do they proceed from one another?
Like all other creatures, God creates them by the divine will. But let me repeat once more, their origin is a mystery.
Question number 82. Is it correct to say that spirits are immaterial?
How can we define something when we have no terms for comparison, and when we only have an insufficient language at our disposal? Can one who is born blind define light? Immaterial is not the right word. Incorporeal would be more precise, because you should understand that since it is a creation, a spirit must be something. A spirit is quintessentialized matter. Thus, you have no analogies for describing it. It is also so etherealized that your senses cannot perceive it.
Author's footnote to quintessentialized matter. Quintessence means fifth essence, the pure and concentrated essence of a substance. Author's remarks for question number 82. We say that spirits are immaterial because their essence differs from everything we label as matter. A nation of blind people would not have any words for expressing light and its effects. Those who are in fact born blind imagine that they perceive everything through their hearing, smell, taste, and touch, but they would not be able to comprehend ideas that came to them through the sense they lack. In the same way, we too are blind, regarding the essence of suprahuman beings. We cannot define them except by an effort involving our imagination or by making comparisons that will always be imperfect. Question number 83. Do spirits have an end? We can understand that the principle from which they emanate is eternal, but what we are asking is whether or not their own individuality will come to an end, and whether or not, like material bodies, at some given time in the near or distant future, the element from which they have been formed will disintegrate and return to the mass from which it came. It is difficult to understand how something that had a beginning would not also have an end.
There are many things you do not understand because your intelligence is limited, but that is no reason to reject them. A child does not understand everything that its parents understand, nor does an uneducated person understand all that a scholar understands. We are saying that spirits' individual existences never come to an end. That is all we can say for now.
Hi everyone, this is James Marota, and today we're going to talk about something we can all donate. In a difficult life like this is, practically nobody gets to keep 100% disposition all the time. Isn't that right? So, even the strongest hearts have their moments of weakness. That's when a word of encouragement can save the day and more. Then, we must be careful about being pessimistic around people who are not feeling well, because we may make things worse than they already are, and because we may miss the opportunity to provide valuable help. By putting out the flame of hope in someone's heart, we can do a lot of damage. It doesn't mean we should be unrealistic. It's just that our words must contribute to renew the energies of the others. As Emmanuel explains in his text, Donation from the Heart. We all have something to give, be it money that relieves the suffering, instruction that banishes ignorance, assistance that removes obstacles, or medicine that wards off the disease. There is, however, one gift we can all share, indistinctly, with absolute advantage for those who receive it, and without any loss for those who give it. We are talking about the blessing of courage. How many have fallen from the highest steps of good, at the limit of their resistance against evil, because they didn't receive some humane comfort through an affectionate and sympathetic phrase? How many have deserted their ennobling tasks, with evident harm to the community, on the verge of victorious closure, only because they didn't have someone who complemented their jeopardized moral forces with the help of a friendly gesture? And how many others fall down daily in frustration or in illness, only because they can't find anything but bitterness and pessimism in the words of those whom they have to live with? Don't arm yourself only with material resources to fight misfortune. Provide yourself with lively faith and hope, understanding and optimism, so that your words become a saving light, able to revive the confidence of so many fellows of humanity who bring in their chests a heart like a dead lamp. Don't leave for tomorrow the moment to encourage the brothers of the way to the service of good. Do that today. Extend them your soul, appealing to what is good, and tell them about their own immortality in the endless treasure of time, and about the inexhaustible resources of the universe. Induce them to recognize the infinite energies they carry and help them discover the divine inheritance of eternal life that palpitate deep inside their spirit, even when they are involved in the worst experiences. May your words be the blaze that helps, the flame that warms up, a support to lean on, the balsam that restores. Whenever you decide to go out of yourself to the labor of beneficence, don't forget the donation of courage. Help the others by all correct means within your reach. But, above all, help your fellow humans from any condition and any origins feel like they are positively our brothers and that they need, as much as we do, the patience and the help of God. Dear listeners, thanks for being with us. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.